Cool. So welcome everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your days to come in and learn something, hopefully, in for Google Analytics, and hopefully you take something that you can use moving forwards in your job or whatever it is that you're doing and whatever you joined this session for. This is part 2 of the Google Analytics series that we ran. A couple of weeks ago, we did another analytics session that was all about setting up analytics from scratch. We went through how to set up analytics, what the best practices were, what are the various things that you need to kind of take care of when you're setting up a brand new account, and other bits and pieces. So there might be some things that if you haven't attended the previous session, that may not make sense. Again, as I said, if anything like that comes across, please feel free to ask the question. Few housekeeping bits. This webinar is getting recorded, so the recording would be available post this session through the same link that you joined through. The time allocation is 2 hours, but we'll try and finish it off in about an hour and a half or so, hopefully. There's no tools required, but I do recommend if you have access to any Google Analytics account, definitely have it handy, keep it open, and you can just run through some of the sections that we go through, and it definitely will make a lot more sense if you're doing it in the actual platform. Polls required for this webinar, and for questions, I think the best way is for you to kind of raise your hand or drop a question in the chat box, and I'll do my best to answer it. A few things about me. I head up the performance and analytics team at Indago, also a co-founder at Indago. I've been in digital for about 9 years. Originally from a finance background, I was a stock market research company straight out of uni, and didn't really enjoy the world of finance. It wasn't for me, so I quickly changed professions and ended up in digital really by chance, and here I am. Previous to Indago, I've worked at some of the bigger kind of global agency networks like OMG and WPP. A few things about Indago and training. Training is very important to us. We do a lot of it internally and externally. We work with some of the industry bodies, some of the recognized industry bodies like ANMA, IAB, AIM, Squared Online, which is Google's kind of training education platform. We've also trained for our clients and other agencies, and we work with various universities across Australia to kind of train or get university graduates sort of interested in the digital marketing advertising industry. Cool. So a quick overview about today's session. We are going to run through about 5 different topics, starting with navigation. Navigation is all about how to basically navigate the platform itself. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of few quirks, and the platform does change here and there as well. So I'll try to take screenshots that are most recent. If there's anything in your Google Analytics account that you can't see in the screenshot, you know, there's nothing to worry about. They do testing of various things, buttons, etc. So it might look different, but hopefully it doesn't. It's all good. And then we'll move on to what the actual reporting sections are. there's behavior reporting, there's acquisition level reporting, audience reporting, and conversion reporting. So we go through each of those sections. I'll take you guys through some of the useful, not only from marketing advertising perspective, but reports that can answer some key business questions as well. Cool, let's continue. It's a bit about what you learn. No need to worry about the interactive session system. We usually deliver in person, and when we do that, we take people through certain exercises which work better, obviously, when you're doing it face-to-face. But for this webinar, we are going to just focus on the presentation. Cool. Usually when you log into Google Analytics, this is sort of the screen that you come across. If you look at the right hand side, there's a few buttons up top. The first kind of bell icon is where all the notifications sit. Sometimes Google will provide notifications around if there's been any kind of user changes, or if you've set up any kind of alerts for yourself, they all might land up here. So it's makes to kind of check this notification section, and that requires attending. Next to this little bell icon is these are the 4 squares. Hi, Larissa. Do you want to just ask in chat if that's okay? Hey, Larissa, you should be able to talk now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, sorry, I tried to put it in chat, but it didn't work. It's
really?
Yeah, it's not like the chat box is up, but it's not appearing. Like when I type, it doesn't appear. I just wanted to let you know your voice is sort of fading in and out.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just wanted to let you know that it's not completely clear.
All right.
Yeah.
Is that any better?
Yeah, it's better now. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It might be my internet connection.
Yeah.
But it usually gives a notification to Zoom system if the voice starts crackling. Anyways, I'll try and get as close to the microphone as possible and stay there.
Okay.
If there's still issues, then yeah, please let me know.
Sure.
Hopefully it's better now. Cool. The next little icon or symbol is about marketing platform products. So what Google has done recently, or not recently, probably in the last kind of couple of years, they've created this umbrella sort of brand almost, or system or platform, however you want to call it, called Google Marketing Platform. And underneath the marketing platform, they've basically placed all the products like Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, Google Optimize. I think there's more than 10 or so now underneath that sort of umbrella brand or umbrella platform. If you have access to anything else, you can quickly access that platform using this Google Marketing Platform icon up here. And then the question mark is obviously the help section. Google Analytics help is actually really good. If you do get stuck and if you have a question, I'd say this should be your first port of call. Type in the question as is, however you want to phrase it, and you should be able to get an answer. If not, then there's other ways that you can just search online, or there's plenty of help online available as well to answer those questions. On the top left-hand side, there's the view selector. So if you are following along in a live kind of Google Analytics account, you can click on this little drop down and it'll show you all the views that your login is connected to. And you can go or jump across between various properties and various views that you have access to. Next up, on the right-hand side is where all the reports sort of sit, but before that, there's a customization section. You can access all the dashboards that you've created, any kind of custom reports that you might have created. All of them live under here, and you can access them easily from this link. Real-time, under the report section, real-time is where all the real-time data sits, which we'll go through it. And then the four kind of key pillars of reporting in Google Analytics. First is audience section or audience reports, where you can find details or data around demographics, devices, age, interests, etc. Then acquisition gives you details on how the users are coming to your site, what channels they're using, and so on. Behavior section is all about getting data about what the users are doing on your website. So what pages they're visiting, how much time they're spending per page, how many pages they're using per session, and so on. And conversion section is where your conversion data sets, so goals, Google Analytics, that's where all that data would sit. Next up is a standard kind of report called the gender report under audience section. This is just an example report to show everyone what you can do in a typical report, or what the different kind of navigation options are in a typical report. First up, on the top right-hand side is the date selector. So again, if you have an analytics account open, definitely recommend you click on it and then see what it opens up. You can obviously select various time ranges. There's some predefined time ranges like last week, last month, yesterday, and so on. You can also create your custom dates. There's a comparison functionality, which allows you to compare between different periods, or same period this year or last year. It's very easy once you open it up and try to work it out. It's very intuitive. You shouldn't have any trouble selecting dates. Then there's all the reports within Google Analytics in the standard report sections have the option to add segments. So up on the top of every report, there's a section to add segments. The standard segment that you'll find across all reports is all users. But if you want to see data by a certain segment, for example, you wanted to see data for users who've come in via a particular channel, let's say paid search, you can create a segment for it and add that segment, and all the reports would show you data only for which is paid search. Change on the graph. You can add a secondary sort of metric, if that makes sense, and you can what metrics you want to see, or sorry. I think there's some problem with the. I'm going to quickly try and change my internet connection to see if that makes any difference. Please bear with me a couple of minutes. Sorry about that. I've just changed my internet connection. Hopefully it's better now. Okay, great. If there's still issues, please let me know, and then I'll try and do something different. Hopefully everyone can see my screen still. Again, if there's any problems, give me a shout. Otherwise, we'll continue. Cool. So I was talking about, I think I'll just repeat the graph section again. Every sort of standard report that you look at will include a graph. There's a couple of things that you can change on the graph. You can obviously change the metric that you're using. In this particular example, it's users. So you can select that little drop down and select the metric that you want to show. And you can also add another metric on top. The metrics that you can choose in the graph are limited to the report that you are viewing. So each report would have slightly different metrics depending on what you're viewing. So you're basically restricted to the metrics that are available in that particular report. Also on this graph, you can change the segmentation of the time range that you're viewing. You can look at it on a daily level, weekly level, or a monthly level. Then at the bottom, there's the actual data. First thing that you'll see is a little kind of search box. So obviously in this example, we're only looking at 2 rows of data. If you were looking at something else like a page report and you were going through, you know, maybe hundreds of pages, and you wanted to look at a particular page, you can, for example, you only wanted to look at data for blog pages, you can quickly type blog in that little search box, and that should filter all the pages to blog pages only, and that's probably the quickest way to do something like that within Google Analytics. There's a secondary dimension option. You can add in another dimension. So again, we explained dimensions and metrics in the previous session, but dimensions are usually the categories that you want to look your data by or segment by.
sometimes one is not enough, and you want to segment that data further by another dimension. So if I wanted to see in this particular example, the age brackets and the gender together, I can add in a secondary dimension for age, and that should give me the data that I'm after. Within the report, there's also the option to select what type of conversions you want to see. So in this example, e-commerce has been set up, so it's showing me e-commerce data. But if I wanted to see a particular goal, there's a little drop-down option here that you can select and choose the goal or anything else that you want to look at. Right at the bottom right-hand side, it shows you the row count. Again, in this example, there's only 2. But you can see up to 5,000 rows at the same time within Google Analytics. That's the limit. Sometimes if you have more than more than sort of 10 rows of data, you might want to expand that to include the whole data set. Sometimes people forget it, and it's a little quirk in Google Analytics where if you want to export any report, it only exports what's visible on the screen. If your data set has more than 10 rows and you haven't expanded the whole view, it will miss all the data that you haven't really expanded to show in the view. So just be careful when you're exporting data. Cool. Moving on. A bit more on date ranges. As I was saying, you have the option to select a custom date range. There's a few predefined date ranges that you can look at as well. Again, if you have an account handy, just have a bit of a play around with the date section. It should be very easy to follow. There's a little comparison section within the date range callout. All you have to do is tick that little compare box that's visible right underneath the date selection, and select what you want to compare it to, whether it's the previous period or the same period previous year. And the data should change accordingly. This is what that little drop down for conversions looks like. For this particular account, there's 5 goals set up, and then e-commerce. We were viewing e-commerce data, but if I wanted to look at just goal 1, which is purchase completed, I can just select goal 1, and it should show me the metrics for that particular goal. Going through the search box, I did explain a little bit about this, but there's another section that I'll show you guys. Next to that little search box, there's a clickable link for advanced. If you click on that link, it opens this little dialog box or whatever you want to call it underneath the search box. And it gives you a few more options on how you want to do your search. You can, in the first little section where it says include, is a little drop down. So once you click on that drop down, it gives you the option of either excluding or including the data. So you have the option to actually include a particular data set by using filters or exclude it completely. Then there's various matching criteria. So you can have containing, you can have begins with, ends with, you can do a regular expression if you feel a little fancy, or exactly matching. So for example, if you wanted to look at just the data for your homepage, you could do a filter for exactly matching /home in this example, which is number 1, and that will give you data for that particular page only. If you have secondary dimensions added, you can actually search or filter by 2 different dimensions. So just sticking to the previous example, if I had gender as my primary dimension and I added age as my secondary dimension, I could do a filter for both age and gender at the same time to get to the data that I want to look at. A little bit more on segments. As I said, the default segment that you'll find across all these reports is all users, but you have the ability to add various other segments on top as well and remove all users if you want to. Once you click on that little choose segment list section, it opens up this little window. Google Analytics has a few predefined segments already created, like direct traffic, organic traffic. Sometimes it has mobile traffic as well in there. You have the ability to create your own segments if you want to look at your data in a particular fashion. All you have to do is either choose one of the predefined ones or your custom segments and add it to the segment section up there and click apply. And you should be able to see the data by the segment that you're looking at. Couple more things on creating a new segment and finding out what the different bits and pieces are in this view. In this little segments window, there's also a search functionality. Sometimes some accounts we find have quite a few segments created because they are big websites and you know, certain departments want to look at their data only. So the analytics team for that particular client has created segments for each of those teams. So instead of scrolling down, you can obviously search for it. Here we'll learn about how to add secondary dimensions. It's very easy to do. Every report or every standard report in Google Analytics would have the option of adding a secondary dimension. All you have to do is click on that little button for secondary dimension and it opens up this drop-down menu. You can select, if you know the name of the section that you want to add, you can just type in that name in the search box and it should show up and you can add it straight away, or you can scroll through the list. Scroll through the list and get to the dimension that you're after and add it in that way. Again, I highly recommend. This is one of those things that makes much more sense when you actually do it within the platform. If you do have an account open in front of you, go into any report really, and then try and add in a secondary dimension. Great, so that was a bit about navigation within Google Analytics, what all of the things mean and where to access different things from. Any questions so far? Anything that isn't clear or you want me to repeat? If all good, then we'll continue. In the very first screenshot, we saw different reports, and the first one, or the first section, is around real-time reporting. So we'll talk about that in this section. A bit on what you will learn from this section. Because it's real-time data, there's not much going on. You can see your data come through real time, which is very interesting to look at, and you can do a bit of testing with it. But besides that, not much insight can be drawn from the data that you get from this section. This is what a standard sort of real-time report looks like. When you open up that real-time section on the left-hand side navigation bar, overview is the default view that you'll come across, and this is what we're looking at. So it gives you information on how many page views are going on per second, what are the active pages in real time. You can look at what locations users are coming from in real time, what the different traffic sources are. Content will show you the different pages that users are going. If you have conversions and events set up, it will show you in real time what events are triggering and what goals are getting triggered in real time as well. So one of the things we use it for is if we have set up a goal, we might come to a real-time report and see if it's actually working. It gives you real-time validation that your goal is actually triggering. Sometimes you have some activity going live on Google Ads or any other kind of advertising platform. Again, for validation purposes, you can come here and see if that traffic source is visible in real-time reports. It gives you a bit of a validation that your ads are working and people are coming through those on the website okay. So yeah, as I said, there's not much to draw from the real-time reports in GA. But we'll carry on, and this is where the real insight comes into play across all the following reports. First one we'll look at is audience reports. A bit on what you will learn, on what kind of data you'll get from this section. I think the best way to look at this report is just getting to know or understanding what your customer looks like, where they're from, what age, interests, demographics, etc. they belong to, and so on. A bit on how Google actually gets that data. In the following reports, I'll take you guys through a report called Interest Report. And it's important to understand where this data actually comes from. If you're signed into Chrome, Google obviously is tracking your activity. If you don't have personalization disabled, you can obviously tell Google to not follow you or track you in any way, shape, or form. But if you are, and if you have personalization on, Google will try to understand your behavior and put you into certain brackets, whether you are, for example, male or female, or if you haven't specified in your Google account, that is, and what your age bracket is, what your interests are, what your location is, and so on. And then anonymize that data across all your users and send it back to Google Analytics. In this screenshot, that ad setting section is highlighted. It's interesting to go to the section underneath your own Google account to see what Google thinks your interests are and what your demographics are and so on. It gives you a lot of information around that. So you might have heard of Google Display Network, all the banners that come across different websites. You click on those banners and they send back information around your demographics and around your personal attributes as well. So it's basically a combination of signed in data coming from Google Display Network, and a couple of other things like Google signals, which all combine to create this data set that we can all see in Google Analytics. Just a couple more examples of the ads on display network. Okay, so when you click on that audience report section, the default view would look something like this. This is called the overview report. It gives you a very quick overview of the number of users, the number of sessions, page views, bounce rate, average session duration, etc. So some of the key kind of metrics across your website. It's good way to kind of look at your metrics at an overview level. But reports like this show you where are a lot more valuable than the overview report, obviously, because they show you a lot more insight into what's going on with your customers and your website. What we're looking at is the demographics report. So underneath audiences, you'd find the demographics report. This report is looking at age. Google, by default, puts all its users or segments all its users across these 6 age brackets. When you click on this report, you can see your data as well, broken down by these age brackets. Some of the business questions that you can answer, or questions in general, what are your best performing demographics? If you click on the gender report, it'll show you obviously this same exact report but split by gender. I gave you an example before of adding a secondary dimension in, and you can look at your data by both age and gender across these same metrics. So it gives you a lot of powerful information on who your customer is really, what the most popular age is, gender is. All advertising platforms have demographic level targeting available now. So looking at this report, you can identify your best performing segments. Sorry, one second. We'll talk about funnel visualization briefly. We're not going to be going through the process of creating funnels today, just for the purpose of keeping everything in time, because it does take time to explain how a funnel is created. So we won't be going through the whole process, but I'm going to give a brief overview on what funnel visualization is and what it actually looks like. Perfect. So carrying on, the other key use, or how we at Indago use this report, is to basically match up the demographics we find here versus what the client demographics are. So we create, all clients have a customer profile that they've created based on their own customer data. We look at this data in Google Analytics and try to create a customer profile based on website visitors, and to see if they actually match. If there is a huge disconnect between the two data sets, then there's an obvious problem that needs to be fixed. The website is targeting a completely different demographic than what the intended demographic is. If they're close enough, then it's all well and good. You can get valuable insights on what targeting works best. And as I was mentioning, all the advertising platforms have such targeting available that you can leverage. The next report is interests. Just underneath the demographic section is the interest section. This screenshot shows the in-market segments. I'll explain quickly what in-market segment is. Google buckets all these interests into various categories and then subcategories underneath. So you can see affinity and in-market, the two key ones. In-market segment is are users who are in market for a certain product according to Google's way of analyzing user behavior. So in this example report, we see number one in market segment as consumer electronics, and then the hyphen suggests that the following is a subcategory. So mobile phones is a subcategory under consumer electronics. And all the people that have been bucketed into that row or users who have been bucketed into that row are in market for mobile phones according to what Google thinks, or Google suggests that they are in market for a mobile phone. So if you were browsing for a mobile phone and you were logged into Chrome, it would be pretty safe to suggest that you're looking to buy a new phone or a plan or whatever have you, and you would be bucketed into that particular in-market segment. Affinity is a little bit different. Affinity is basically if you have shown affinity for a particular category. I love video games. I play a lot of video games. So I'm always looking for what new video games are coming out. What, what's the best kind of open world video game and so on. So Google would be able to bucket me into the gaming affinity category because I am a gamer, and I am always browsing or looking for tips and tricks on various video games that I play. So that would be an example of an affinity segment. Again, I think from a business perspective and usage perspective, all this insight is extremely valuable because you can understand where the interests and affinities of your actual audience is. You can use that in, again, advertising platforms. These categories, all of these categories are available on Google Ads. So you can target, display, or even search these days using these categories. Again, you can marry up this data with your own data if you have that level of reporting internally available where you can track interests or affinities or anything equivalent to see if it sort of matches up or not. You can get ideas for related content. So if you find that a huge proportion of your user base is or has shown affinity to let's say electronics again, then you can start writing up some blog posts or something like that on electronics to further that engagement. Next up is geo level report. Just underneath interests sits geo. If you open up that little drop down, it shows language and location. We're looking at a location level report. I think one of the most important reports to look at, I'd say, is the location level report. Lots of things that you can do with it. One of the things that we look at it is to get some sort of validation that the traffic is actually coming from the places the website is actually targeting. Sometimes you find a disproportionately large number of users coming from a country you'd never targeted. It might be bot traffic, it might be just your ads targeting an incorrect location, for example. And if that happens, that all of that needs obviously rectification. Some countries in here are clickable. So again, if you have access to a Google Analytics account, you can go to this report, and let's say you're looking at Australia, you can click as a country and it opens up the regions underneath it, which is the states. You can get state level reporting from there on as well, and so on. Similarly with languages as well. With languages, it shows you the same metrics, but split out by different languages. Obviously, a lot of the websites in Australia are targeting English, but we've had a couple of instances where we've seen a disproportionately or significant number of users coming from another language. It was Chinese, I think. And that sort of built up a case where we were able to go to the client and tell them that there's, 10% of your users coming from a Chinese language category, and who potentially speak Chinese and who are looking for content on your website in Chinese. The conversion rate for that particular line or that particular language was really poor, because you could imagine that people who probably are not as proficient in English looking for content in Chinese but still want to buy the product but are unable to because the content is not in their first language. So in that particular example, the client created dedicated Chinese language pages, and they actually converted their purchase funnel into Chinese as well, and the result was absolutely amazing. Conversion rate was, I think it was 2 times the standard site average. So things like that and insights like that can lead to success like that. Next up is behavior. So under behavior, there's a few different reports. This one is looking at new versus returning. It's pretty self-explanatory. It tells you the proportion of new users. New users are defined as users who visited your site for the first time within the cookie timeframe set by Google Analytics. Anyone who's visited subsequently is bucketed as a returning user. Again, I think very important to look at this report. It's just interesting to look at the difference between the behavior of a new user versus a returning user. One of the key differences you'll find most of the time is the conversion rate, which is significantly higher for returning users almost all the time, at least in my experience. There's a lot of valuable information under this section that you can use to inform your remarketing strategies. If your returning users are actually in this case, almost 4 times more valuable or 4 times higher in terms of conversion rate, then there's various things that you can do. And again, advertising platforms, you can remarket to these people. You can, in platforms like Google Ads, bid higher for these people because you know that the return is going to be higher, and so on. Next up is technology. We are going to look at the browser and OS reports. Just underneath behavior is technology. This is maybe not so useful in day-to-day sort of advertising insights for advertising insight purposes and so on, but it's important to look at this report to see if there's any differences in user behavior across different browsers, because sometimes certain websites behave differently across browsers. For example, there might be a difference between how users can see or access or engage with the website on Chrome versus Safari. And if there is a significant difference, it's important or it's worthwhile to take this report to your devs and see if there's anything that needs changing. One example that I can think of is we had a client and their website wasn't working as well on Safari. It wasn't converting. The site conversion rate, or the conversion rate on Safari was well below site average. And we found a problem with how Safari was rendering the conversion funnel or the conversion pages, which had to be rectified. So we went to the devs and worked with them to rectify those pages, and that solved the problem. So that sort of insight can come from looking at this report. Next up is mobile. Underneath technology is mobile. When you look at the overview report, this particular screenshot shows you devices. If you click on the overview report under mobile, it gives you your data segmented by the different devices as defined by Google, which is desktop, mobile, and tablet. I think, again, one of the most important reports to look at, to see the proportion of traffic coming via different device, the performance. It's important to look at it from a bug fixing perspective. Again, like finding differences between different browsers. You might have differences between different devices as well. Maybe your website isn't rendering properly on mobile, and that's why the conversion rate is low. That obviously needs dev work to be fixed. You can take information from that device level report into your advertising platform. So if users on mobile are converting 2 times more as compared to either tablet or desktop, you can leverage that within your advertising platforms, bid higher for mobile, for example, and so on. This device level report breaks down your data by different devices, actually. So you can look at, what's your performance on Apple iPhone, Google Pixel, and so on. And again, just like browsers, there might be differences here that need fixing. There might be bugs that are relevant for certain devices. So you can take this report to your devs if you find something peculiar, and they can work on it. Any questions so far? Anything that you'd like me to repeat, or otherwise we'll kick on. Next up is acquisition reports. Here's a bit on what you'll learn. The best way to think about this section is it's all about understanding where your users are coming from. So what channels they're using, what sort of landing pages, what advertising platforms, if you are running any advertising, they're using, and so on. Before we go through the different reports, this is a quick kind of cheat sheet on how different channels are defined in Google. So on the left-hand side is channel as per Google. These are the default channels that are available, which we'll see in subsequent reports. Organic search is basically all the SEO traffic. And there's Google automatically identifies, traffic coming from search engines like Google, Bing, Yahoo, and buckets them under organic search. Direct is, for example, traffic coming directly to your website if you've typed in the address of the website and just went to the website straight up from the browser. That would be regarded as direct, and so on. When you click on the acquisition section, the overview report looks like this. Again, like the previous kind of overview reports, it's a quick overview, not much insight here. You can figure out different trends quickly. If you find a sudden drop-off in users, for example, it obviously needs investigation, so it gives you a bit of a starting point, what to look at. But the real kind of more important insight is in the following reports. So first up under all traffic, under acquisition is channels report. This is what we're looking at right now. So as I was saying, these are the channels, the default channel grouping that you see in this report: organic, direct, social, and so on. These are all default predefined by Google according to the definitions that we just went through. You can actually add in your own default grouping as well if you feel like your business requires a little bit more segmentation, or this default grouping doesn't work for you. We won't be going through how to do that, but there's customization available if it's needed. So I think this is probably one of the most important sections. I think all sections in G are important to look through, but I think this is probably one report that I certainly spend a lot of time looking at this particular section, the all traffic section. Gives you details on where your traffic is coming from. You can compare different metrics amongst the channels. Is your paid search performing better than organic search or worse? Is the quality of traffic coming via direct better than the others, for example, and so on. You can get to know your referrals. So all these should be clickable. So if you have, again, a Google Analytics account open, go to this report and maybe click on referrals, and it'll give you all the referrals that are sending traffic to your website, which is the other kind of referring domains, for example. So sometimes you find there's opportunities to work directly with these websites. If you find a referral sending a significant amount of traffic to your website, you can maybe try and contact that website and see if there's any kind of opportunity to work together. Just a quick, almost a diversion in this section is around linking Google Ads. If you're running Google Ads and you have Google Analytics enabled on your website and you're using it, it's absolutely imperative that you link Google Ads to Google Analytics, because it will give you enhanced reporting in Google Analytics. You can see your Google Ads data in Google Analytics in the same platform. Obviously, there's certain things that won't be available here, but it'll reduce the time of you kind of jumping between the two platforms. So highly recommend you link Google Ads if you're running ads on that platform. It's a pretty easy process. Underneath, and we went through the admin section in the previous webinar. Underneath the property settings, there is a Google Ads linking section. Click on that and it opens up a window like this that looks like this. All you need is, first of all, access the same Google account should have access to both the platforms, Google Ads and Google Analytics. If that is the case, you should be able to find the Google Ads account underneath this section that needs linking or that you want to link. Add in the views that you want the data to come through. So in this particular case, we are sending Google Ads data to all the 3 views that we have set up: master view, test view, raw data view. And sometimes there's a little section right at the bottom for additional data, which is optional. Excuse me. If you're running any display network activity within Google Ads, it's worthwhile enabling Google Display Network Impression Reporting. What this does is it gives you impression level data within Google Analytics for all your display campaigns, and then you can look at your conversion data post impression instead of post click, which is extremely important for a display campaign. Okay, coming back to the acquisition reporting. Once you have Google Ads linked, you can go to the Google Ads section underneath acquisition and look at various reports that sit underneath it. You can look at your campaigns here and compare session level information against your cost level information. You can look at hour up-to-date reporting, for example, to identify what parts of the day work best for you. Is there any opportunity to optimize budgets, for example, if the conversion rates between, let's say, 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. are terrible? There might be a case to just stop advertising during those times, and move the budget across to some of the better performing times of the day, and information like that. There are other products that you can link to Google Analytics as well. For example, you can link Search Console, which is almost like not necessarily Google Ads, but for lack of better words, Google Ads for organic, so to speak. These two products are a must, I think, if you are running really any kind of activity and you are running Google Ads. Definitely link Search Console and Google Ads to Google Analytics, and you'll find the data is much more enhanced, and you can view all the information in sort of one place, which really does save time. Underneath Google Ads section, if you have Search Console is linked as well, you can find information about your organic traffic. Obviously, this is all Google search engine data. So if you obviously, there's other search engines out there like Bing and Yahoo and so on. That data wouldn't appear underneath the Search Console section because it's limited to Google by nature. You can find information around your landing pages, information around your organic search data. You can identify various opportunities to optimize your SEO traffic. At the device level, at the query level, you can go to the query section. Obviously, queries have been limited quite a bit, but there's still some data that comes through. You can look at them and see if you're hitting the right queries, if you need to change your targeting within your SEO strategy to something else to enable better performance and so on. Underneath the Search Console reports is the social section. Google by default actually understands and regularly updates its own database about various social platforms out there. So if you have referral traffic coming from a network like Facebook or Instagram or Reddit, it should, in 99.9% of the cases, it will automatically identify that traffic and bucket it into a social network like it has done for this particular screenshot. So it knows that there's been traffic coming from YouTube, Facebook, and it's bucketed it all underneath the right social network. Obviously, if you're doing a lot of content across your social media accounts, it's important to come to this section and see what the performance is. This is just an overview report, but there's other reports. If you look at the navigation menu on the left-hand side, you can see conversion level information, which platforms are converting better than the others, if that is indeed your strategy. What is the user flow? How users are kind of flowing between different networks, and so on. Obviously, it also acts as a bit of a validation as well. So if you're running some sort of content piece which is not sponsored on things like Quora or Reddit, you can come here and see if the traffic is actually coming across from those particular networks where you're investing time. One thing that we used this report for was we found for a particular client, we were getting some traffic from Reddit, and it wasn't a huge amount, but the conversion rates were significantly higher than site average, and we decided to do a sponsored post or sponsored ads on Reddit, which performed extremely well. So that's another example or another case to look at this report. Those are some of the key reports that you should be looking at in the acquisition section. We'll be moving to the behavior reports next. But before that, if there's any questions at all, use the chat box or you can raise your hands. Otherwise, we'll continue. Cool, we'll just carry on. The next section is around behavior reports. So a quick overview on what this section is all about. And again, the easiest way to look at this section or think about a section is what users are doing once they come to the website. This section is all about that. What pages they're viewing, how they've landed on your website, how they're exiting, and so on. Once you click on behavior, the overview section looks like this. Gives you a quick overview of how many page views you're getting, what's the bounce rate, what's the exit rate. If there's an obvious anomaly in any of these metrics or the graphs, it's worth investigating further. If your bounce rate suddenly jumps to, let's say, for this example, it goes up to 80%, then there's obviously something that needs investigation. And this report can give you a bit of a starting point. First report we'll look at is all pages. Underneath behavior, site content is all pages report. As the name suggests, it gives you information on what pages are being visited, how many times, what's the bounce rate, exit rate, and so on across all the pages of your website. I think there's lots of interesting insight here. If you look at the bounce rate for a particular page and you notice that it's really high, and maybe it's a blog page, there's something not right with the content that's sitting on that page. If you find that people are exiting quite a lot from a certain page by looking at the exit percentage, that might require further investigation. For example, if a particular page was part of your was not intended as a page that you'd normally expect users to exit and had a really high exit percentage page, there's something wrong with that page. Maybe it's not rendering properly and users sort of get stuck on that page, or something with the content is not right on that page, and you might want to look into things like that. Time on average time on page is a good metric to look at as well, especially if you're a bit of a content-based website, or if you're running a blog and you intend people to actually spend time on your pages and it's not happening. Let's say average read time, you can get that across various platforms. These are your average read time was for an article 5 minutes and people only spend 20 seconds on that, then maybe you need to modify or update the content to make it a little bit more engaging, or do a little bit more testing to see if that makes any difference. Other couple of important reports to look at underneath the site content section would be landing pages and exit pages. Again, if you have GA open in front of you, definitely recommend going to that section. So go to landing pages, go to exit pages. Landing pages, as the name suggests, is first page users come when they visit your website. So it's the point of entry to your website. Exit is, as the name suggests, how people leave the website, or what pages people are using to actually leave the website. If you're using dedicated landing pages, so a lot of times across paid campaigns, particularly, clients intend to create dedicated paid search or display landing pages. You can come to the landing pages section to see how effective they are. Usually the purpose of a dedicated landing page is either engagement or some kind of a conversion. If the conversion metrics are poorer than the site average, then you may need to change, or you may need to do a little bit more testing to tweak those pages further. And exit pages you can look at to see and identify if there's any pages that are significantly higher in terms of exit percentages, and go to those pages to see what the UX is on that particular page, why people are actually leaving that particular page, and so on. So important to look at those two reports as well. Next up is site speed. This is an important section. Again, I think just like that browser report that we went through earlier, not so much to do with advertising or kind of business level insights, but more around around identifying opportunities to improve your site speed. Site speed is a huge thing across Google and across the internet, really. If you want your site to be ranking well, if you want, better quality score in your Google Ads campaign, your site speed needs to be at a certain level for all of that to happen. This report gives you a lot of information on what you can do to improve the site speed of your pages. You can come to the page timings report, which we are looking at right now. And Google will basically give you opportunities on what to do exactly to improve the site speed of your page and of the website as well. Underneath the page timings report, there's a speed suggestions report. If you click on that particular report, you can basically click on a page, and Google will give you the opportunities it has automatically identified to improve the speed of that particular page. All you need to do is download that report and take it to your dev or whoever is managing your website, and see what can be implemented, and how you can improve your site speed further. A lot of the times we find clients have uploaded images that are quite large, and the simple fix is just reducing the size of the images. That hugely impacts the overall page speed and the speed of the site as well. Site search is the section after site speed. We're looking at a search terms report underneath the site search section. Maybe not so relevant for everyone, but if you're an e-commerce website, you definitely need to set up your site search within Google Analytics. Again, in the previous webinar, we went through how to set it all up. And that gives you insight onto what people are actually searching on your website. So this is a screenshot from a demo account that Google runs. It's actually a demo account, but the website is real life. They have a merchandising store where you can buy all kinds of Google swag if you're interested in that. And this is where the screenshot is from. So you can see the different searches people have done on that particular website, like gopher, beanie, speakers, and so on and so forth. So data like that becomes hugely important, because you can you get to know what your users actually want from the website. Sometimes users come to the website and search for a particular product, for example, which doesn't exist on your website. And that gives you a bit of a case on, if users are searching indeed for that particular product, maybe I should be selling it, or maybe I should explore the opportunity of selling it, and so on. Sometimes people search for a particular how-to or something like that, or something that is not very obvious on the website, and that gives you a bit of an idea on UX, because people probably are not finding the content that should be easily visible or easily findable by the users when they come to the website. So you might need to tweak your website to make it a little bit more user friendly, where people can come in and get what they want, really. Next up is events. The event section is events in Google Analytics is they're probably the most versatile thing that sort of exists, really. You can set up events for anything and everything. They need to be set up for this report to work. We went through the setup of events briefly in the previous webinar. But examples of where you would want to set up events are any particular clicks on the websites that are important to you. For example, a lot of our clients have PDFs spread across their website, and they want to be able to track how many people are clicking on the links to download these PDFs. So something like that would require or can be set up by setting up these events. Another good example would be how many people are clicking on, if you have login functionality on your website, how many people are clicking on the login button for you to understand the proportion of traffic that's logged in versus not logged in, and so on. Obviously, all of that information is available in your CRM systems and whatnot in the backend, but that's living in that silo. If all of that information come into Google Analytics and you can see that information across various reports, it becomes hugely beneficial. Next up is conversions, but any questions on anything that we've gone through so far? If I'm talking fast, or if this is all going too quick for any one of you, please let me know, and I'm going to try and slow down. Otherwise, we'll kick on. Cool, let's carry on. The last section is all about conversions. Quick overview of what you'll learn from this section. And this is what a conversion overview report looks like. Underneath conversions, goals, the default view or the default report is overview. And this is what it looks like. Very, very handy to look at it quickly to see if there's been any drop-offs, any kind of anomalies or significant differences day on day or week on week or whatever have you. It's a very basic report. All the goals that you set up appear here. You are limited by 20 goals in Google Analytics. The goals don't work retrospectively. Sometimes you have the easiest goal to set up would be for a thank you page that may appear for when someone submits an inquiry through a form. That thank you page is getting tracked in Google Analytics fine, but you may have forgotten to set up a goal for it, a destination goal to be more specific. If you set up the goal today for that particular thank you page, using that particular thank you page, it's not going to work retrospectively. It's only going to start collecting data from the point when you set it up. There's a couple of sections that we go through in the following slides. First is funnel visualization. So if I go back to the screenshot previously, underneath goals, there's a section called funnel visualization. The next screenshot is that particular section. If you are able to create a funnel for your particular goal or the metric or the KPI that you are chasing, you should definitely set it up. For this, again, this is looking at the website, the Google website, merchandising website, and they did have a purchase process where you had to submit your billing information, shipping information, and then confirmation. So they've set up a funnel to exactly identify how the funnel looks like, what's the level of drop off at various points in the funnel. But there might be cases where you have a single form and that's really your key conversion on the website. In that particular case, obviously a funnel is not as relevant. But if you can set it up, definitely set it up. This is what it looks like. Gives you drop-offs and exits at various stages. If you find there's a significant amount of drop-off happening at a particular step, higher than average of the previous steps and so on, it's worth identifying. Maybe there's something wrong on that particular page. We had a case where the drop-off just before buying was in excess of 95%, and it stayed at that level for a couple of days, and obviously there was a problem, and the problem was the payment or the merchant who was responsible for all the payments wasn't really working properly, wasn't rendering properly, so people weren't able to put in their credit card details or PayPal details or whatever have you, and we got it fixed working with the merchant, and it all worked out fine. But that's just one example of how you might want to use this funnel. A little bit on the e-commerce section. So if I go back a couple of screenshots, underneath the conversion goals section, there's e-commerce. Again, this also is case-by-case basis. Not all websites are e-commerce. If you have an e-commerce website, you should set up or enable e-commerce tracking. We spoke about e-commerce tracking a little bit in our last webinar. There's two different types of e-commerce tracking. One is standard e-commerce, and the next level, which gives you a little bit more detail, is enhanced e-commerce. For this particular website, the Google merchandising website, they have enhanced e-commerce setup, and this is a screenshot of one of the reports that you can access underneath the e-commerce section. So again, all the information around your revenue metrics, product metrics is available here. You can look at SKU level information within the e-commerce section. So it can become quite granular, which is great. You can look at it at a product level to see what products are driving what level of revenue. You can add in some secondary dimension to e-commerce reports like source medium or channel to see which channels drive better conversion rates or which products are better off being promoted on Facebook versus paid search and so on. And you can make various sort of marketing and advertising decisions using that. Sorry, Google Analytics we won't be covering in this webinar. It's a very, very new product. It was only announced, I think 3 weeks ago. Earlier it was called App plus Web Property, which they've kind of renamed and reconfigured to GA4. Internally, we are kind of experimenting with it at the moment. We're not quite there yet where we can do a webinar on it, but as soon as we have content available for it, we'll put up a webinar on GA4, definitely. Cool, moving on. Sylvia, I'm not sure I follow your question. Yeah, it probably is because it's not set up in your e-commerce section. Do you have an e-commerce website, or and do you know if it was set up indeed or not? Right. I think it probably is a case of you setting it up. So underneath the admin section, there's also a little button that you need to turn on for e-commerce data to come through. Without that, even if you have it all set up, the view wouldn't show any data because you haven't actually enabled it. So underneath, I think it's under property settings. There's e-commerce somewhere. I can't remember exactly, and you should check if it's actually turned on or not. And then if it's all set up, because you need to set up some kind of tracking, etc. to do it. The enhanced, and also depending on what kind of implementation you've got. So if it's standard e-commerce, then you don't really need the enhanced e-commerce button on. But obviously, if you have enhanced e-commerce reporting implemented, then you need to turn that option on as well. It really depends on what implementation setup you've got. Potentially, you can do it via GTM, or you can do it straight up on the website. And e-commerce setup is a little bit more complicated. There's some dev work that you'll need to do. Not all of it can be done via GTM. There's very few circumstances where you can, but usually it doesn't work. There's some scripts that will need to go on the website to make it all work. No worries. We can, if you need a little bit more help, happy to chat after this, but let's continue. Next up is multi-channel funnels. So if I go back again, a couple of screenshots. The last section under conversions is multi-channel funnels. If you open it up, this is kind of the multi-channel conversion visualizer. It's like all the overview kind of reports. It's interesting to understand how your different channels are working together, what the overlap rate is, how many different channels users are interacting to convert, and so on. There's obviously various benefits to look at looking at this report to understand what's the appropriate marketing mix for your channels. If there's any channel that's lagging or leading, you may need to change your marketing strategy to optimize performance overall, and so on. Underneath this report, you'll find a lot of attribution related information. This multi-channel funnels report is very interesting and a little bit complicated. We won't be covering a lot of it underneath this particular webinar because obviously we are all constrained by time. But there are a lot of interesting attribution reports and insights that you can get. Before we jump into the next kind of couple of slides, attribution obviously is a huge topic these days. It's a way of attributing performance across various channels that have played a role, at least in a path to a conversion. Google Analytics by default, all reports that we've seen so far are last interaction or last click reports. The conversions that you see that have been attributed to, various channels like organic, email, etc. They've all been they've all been attributed based on last interaction model. But underneath the multi-channel funnel section, Google does give you the ability to look at your data and compare it against various other channels that are available within the platform, like position-based, time decay. You can actually create a custom model of your own if there's specific requirements based on your business needs. And you can compare the data between the two attribution models, the standard GA versus the one that you have opted. So this is what the model comparison tool looks like. So underneath multi-channel funnels, there is a section called model comparison. Definitely recommend everyone looking at it. You can compare, in this example, we are looking at last interaction, which is the standard model, versus last non-direct click model. Last non-direct click model excludes any conversion attributed to direct if direct was the closing channel, if that makes sense. So if I came in via, if I had 3 channels in a path to a conversion, let's say I initially came to the website via paid search, and then I came via organic, and then I converted using direct. Last interaction model will give all of the conversion value to direct, but last non-direct will give all of the conversion value to organic, because it's ignoring the direct interaction because it is the closing channel. Sometimes it's a great way to just eliminate the direct channel altogether, because we want to attribute more value to channels that we can sort of control. If you think about it, direct is you can't really influence direct traffic that much, but you can certainly influence paid traffic, and you can definitely influence traffic from organic channels by doing various optimizations and so on. And it is a way to shift that value of conversion to the channels that are under your control, because then you can optimize those channels, and the overall number of conversions that you get across all your marketing channels should be impacted by your efforts. In this example, as soon as we compare it against the last non-direct click, literally every channel, if you look at the last column, increases in terms of its value. And obviously direct loses almost 50% of the conversions. And it's redistributed across various other channels in this particular mix. As I said, I think attribution is a huge topic. I mean, it requires a lot more chat than me talking to you guys about it for 10 minutes. It's definitely worth looking at reports like this within Google Analytics. You can compare it against various other standard models that are available. And the help section that I mentioned before is very good. If you don't understand what the model is and how it all works, you can just type in your query in that help section and find the answer to it. But definitely worth looking at it, because the standard model within Google Analytics, the last interaction, is the easiest for Google to use to represent the data to the users like us, because it requires the least amount of processing. But it may be not the best for your purposes, for your business, and for the marketing mix that you are running. And that was it, really. As I said, I think what the purpose of this webinar was to take you guys through some of the key reports and what you can get out of it, not necessarily get into the nitty-gritty of each of those reports. There's definitely more reports within Google Analytics, the standard reporting section, that are worth looking and exploring. So again, if you have access to a Google Analytics account, definitely, browse and try and understand what the different reports look like and what insights you can get out of them. If you don't have access to a Google Analytics account, go to Google and search for Google Analytics demo account, and it would give you a page with a link to the demo account. All you need is either an email associated to a Google account or a Gmail to access it. It's the Google merchandising store that they've opened up to pretty much all users. It's real data in that particular account. It's a real website. You can actually go to the website and look how it is. And that's another great way to kind of practice and look at different reports within Google Analytics. Were there any questions at all? If not, thank you very much for sticking around and going through all these reports today. As I said, the webinar link will be available through the Zoom link that was initially shared, and you can view this webinar in your own time. Otherwise, have a good day and good week.